And there it is, Ryan. Brauntae Johnson has officially committed to the University of Notre Dame. Let's give a little backstory on this one, Ryan. Obviously, this is one we've known about for here a little bit, but this is does not take away at all from how big it is. But Brauntae Johnson is now
Yeah.
officially in the Notre Dame class. This is a big one.
Oh no, it's massive. I mean, obviously, this is a kid that I remember initially, Brian, when we're really diving into 2024. A year ago at this point, people were like, what's the state with Brauntae Johnson? Because he's a top-ranked kid in the state of Indiana, and obviously there were some just academic hurdles that need to be figured out. But Notre Dame was always incredibly high on Brauntae as a football player. Which, I mean, when we get into the film, you'll see why. This kid is incredibly talented, incredibly gifted. And there were some academic hurdles that he needed to get past in order to make sure that he is a complete fit at the University of Notre Dame. Because from everything that I've been able to gather, that we've been able to gather, not only does he fit on the field, but from a character perspective, he sounds like a great young man, a kid that will fit socially at Notre Dame. It's just about making sure that the whole fit made sense. So this is one where only a few weeks ago came back that he had worked his butt off. He had kind of put his head down, and he had gotten the grades that he needed in order to be much more optimistic about his place at a place like the University of Notre Dame. So this was only, for me, Brian, as long as the fit made sense, this is what the reality was going to be for Brauntae. Because let's face it here, Brauntae Johnson wanted to be a part of Notre Dame. He doesn't put the work in. He doesn't put his head down the way he did if he didn't want to be a part of the university. So we heard, was it a couple weeks ago at this point, because it got delayed a little bit, right? Because just kind of making the announcement and getting all the stuff ready for the commitment and everything. We knew that this one was obviously coming. So huge pickup for the University of Notre Dame. High 4-star caliber athlete. I would argue he's a 5-star upside type of kid from an athleticism perspective. Great basketball player from North Side as well. Big time get for the safety group that has had some questions, obviously, in 2024, but this is a big way to start to answer those question marks.
Oh, there's no question about it, Ryan. When you look at where Notre Dame is, they need impact players in the back end of their defense. I mean, that's just a fact. And so to get a kid like this, and again, to be able to miss out on a kid like this from your backyard would have been painful. It would have stung. There's no doubt about it. And I love the story, right? I mean, we're Notre Dame fans, right? Most of us love the movie Rudy. People have mentioned hey, this is like Rudy. No. And we were joking before, like, yeah, if Rudy was like tall, athletic, really talented, like,
and every school in the country wanted him.
Yeah, sure. You know what I mean? But it's more of the aspect of like boy, this is a kid that really saw something he wanted and said, you know what? Yeah, I gotta work for it. And in today's era, especially, I think that's so greatly appreciated because there are so many other options for a kid like him. I mean, some very good options. He could have easily said, you know what? They don't want me. They think I need to do this. Forget that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to still do it because this is what I want. And you got to love that. And you know where it comes from, right? Like kids like that at his age don't just decide it on their own with no support. There's also a family support system there to push him there. And obviously that's a big part of this too, Ryan. So let's talk about how this impacts the class first and foremost, Ryan. What does a kid like Brauntae Johnson, how does it impact the safety class? How does it impact the Notre Dame defensive class as a whole?
I mean, I think there's multiple layers to that question. I mean, first and foremost, Brauntae Johnson adds a lot of talent to the table, right? And we're talking about this year, 2024, being a class where after you've had your misses over the last couple of years at the safety position with Xavier Nwankpa 2 years ago and losing out on Peyton Bowen and Brandon Hillman, obviously this past cycle, it was very important not only for Notre Dame to get numbers in 2024, but also get impact talents, right? To get guys that have a high upside and have the ability to affect the game in multiple ways. And I think that if developed properly, that's exactly what Brauntae Johnson is. And he also brings a skill set that you just don't have enough of on this roster. Forget about the 2024 class, because we could look at it and say, like, Kennedy Urlacher and Tabron Benny Powell, like, they're very much more get your nose dirty, get downhill, rotate down. Kennedy, obviously, I think has a little more comfort working from depth than what Tabron does right now. But there's no question that Brauntae Johnson is going to be a young man that's, call it a free safety, call it a boundary safety, whatever you want. This kid's going to be a kid that can make plays in coverage and can make plays from depth and make a lot of plays on the football and creates a big like those momentum switching plays is what I look like for a Brauntae Johnson. You know, the interceptions, the pass breakups, the forced fumbles, working from him for pursuits. Like, this is a young man that, if developed properly, he brings you a skill set that you don't have enough of in the recruiting class, on the roster, and he obviously adds a lot of impact talent. So now you're up to number 3 safety in the class. You're trending now in a much better direction than when you were where you were just a couple days ago here.
The other thing, Ryan, when you look at a recruitment like this, obviously, is you needed some momentum at the position. I think that's an important piece of this puzzle too. And like, I like Kennedy Urlacher a lot. I think Kennedy has a lot of upside, and obviously the Notre Dame coaching staff likes Tay Baron Betty Powell more than you and I do. But you needed at least one guy that you look at and say, okay, I don't have to bet on so much on this guy. Now, look, this is a situation where Brauntae has work to do in the weight room and technical and aspects like that. But there's a higher floor in this one because he's a football player. That's the thing, is like, we're going to show on film. He has a lot of technical work that's needed. He's more of a wide receiver right now. And early on, a lot of people ranked him and had him viewed as a wide receiver. But defense, to me, is the position that he's better suited for. To me, it's just a position that he needs the most work. But the floor is higher, Ryan, because the talent level is so much greater. And that was an important piece of this conversation, was getting that. And kudos to the Notre Dame staff for not bad. It would be so easy, especially after what happened with Brandon Hillman last year, for the Notre Dame coaching staff to say, you know what, we're not going to deal with that this cycle around. But they didn't. They stayed true because they knew that whatever the academic record showed or whatever the case may be, they knew this was a Notre Dame kid, Ryan. That's the big thing here. This is a Notre Dame kid. Like, people talk about Rudy. To me, the better example would be like Tony Rice, Chris Zorich. Guys who maybe weren't didn't have the prototypical transcript or whatever the case may be, but you're looking to say, boy, that's a Notre Dame kid. That is a kid that will thrive at Notre Dame because he's going to put in the work, and he's going to put in the work in football too. A little bit for those who don't know, and I would assume most do, he's also an outstanding basketball player, which factors in, Ryan, why he is more fundamentally unsound in football and why he's still on the skinnier side. Is because when he's not playing football, this kid's playing basketball, and he's 20+ point per game scorer at Northside. So, that's another thing that has to be taken into consideration when he is finally able to dedicate his time and off season to football. His game is going to take off, and that's why I gave him a 5-star upside grade, Ryan. I'm not sure where you stand on that, and we'll show the film, but I haven't given out as many 5-star upside grades this year. I'm trying to be more picky with those. But there's no way I could deny Brauntae Johnson of that. The talent is just too good. And when you put in the circumstances of this is not a kid playing 7-on-7 year round and doing all those type of things, he's more playing basketball more part of the year than he is football. Once football becomes the priority from a time standpoint, this young man's body and his game is going to take off.
Well, and we've talked obviously about, because I agree, we've talked about his upside in the past, and he's a 5-star upside kid to me as well. And one thing, Brian, that's great is that, I have had the chance to talk to his head coach at Northside, Ben Johnson Jr., a couple times now, a couple weeks ago, and then more recently, where I'll have a little bit of a coach piece out later today where, guys, basically, to Brian's point here, I asked about, Brauntae's upside. And I think when you saw him commit, if you were with us earlier in the video, very young face, right? Like, this is a 17-year-old kid. He's not even close to the maturity level that he's going to get to from a physical perspective. Like, a lot of room to grow there. But I talked to him and he said his upside is limitless. Like, he doesn't have a ceiling because he's a kid that is just always on the move. Like, he's never sitting still. He's always out playing football, out playing basketball, travel basketball, doing the workouts. And so this is a young man, to Brian's point, that when you're able to just sit down and focus on one sports and one skill set and be able to really hone in on your craft and get into the weight room with Coach Bayless and that strength staff and the nutritional side of things, this kid's going to blow up. He's 6'3", 170 pounds listed right now. He's going to be 200 pounds right around by the time he is a senior at the University of Notre Dame. This kid's going to be a 6'3", 190, 200-pound kid. when it's all said and done, because he has the body to easily put on that weight and to easily add to his frame. So as he really focuses on football, sky's the limit, man. It really is. Because Brian, it's not even just, putting basketball on the side, because to your point, he's a 20-point per game scorer, over 7 rebounds a game, 3.6 steals a game for Northside. He could legitimately play college basketball as well if he wanted to. But he also is a kid who is a wide receiver safety for his high school. I mean, he had over 1,000 yards receiving as a wide receiver last year. So forget about stop playing basketball. He's also going to stop playing both sides of the football and stop returning punts and kicks. And this is the type of young man. And we have Notre Dame has a lot of them in the 2024 class, of kids that are asked to do so much that it's like they're going to blow up the minute they are just asked to do one thing. And I think that very highly of Brauntae Johnson. He brings a unique skill set to the table. Obviously, keeping a talented in-state player at home, right? Like we always talk about it. You're not always going to strike gold in the state of Indiana on a year-to-year basis, but when there's a player that is this type of difference maker and he can fit from all vantage points, you got to keep him in the state. He can't get out of the state of Indiana.
You have to get him right, and that's a big part of it. So, impact talent. Love the story and all of those things, but the biggest thing is the story is fine, but the story doesn't win you football games. You need talent, and Brauntae has talent. You need work ethic, and from everybody we've ever talked to, including the people at Notre Dame, because trust me, Notre Dame has done a lot of work on trying to make sure and find out if Brauntae fits at Notre Dame, if he can handle the work, if he's willing to do the work. All of those type of things. They have put in the work to find out if he's that kind of kid, and that he checked every box, which is why they were willing to stay into this one. So this is a really big commitment for Notre Dame. Obviously, when you look at how it impacts the recruiting class, Ryan, you and I were kind of going over this beforehand. For those who care about recruiting rankings, this moves the needle for Notre Dame. This moves Notre Dame back up to number 2 in the rankings for rivals. Because Brauntae obviously is their number 58 player in the country, so they leap Michigan despite having one fewer player than Michigan, and this moves them up to number 4 ahead of Ohio State in the 247 sports rankings. So certainly a big commitment for Notre Dame in a lot of different ways. The funny, you mentioned right, if Notre Dame had needs at receiver and they landed Brauntae Johnson, I would be excited about this pickup. Now, I will say this, having seen him in person, because he earned his offer at the Irish Invasion last year. He came to Irish Invasion, and it was him, Caleb Beasley, CJ Carr, and Cam Williams were the 4 best players on the field, and it wasn't really close. Mylan Graham was in there too. He was pretty good at that event too, but those 4 were the best players at that event. And when you looked at Brauntae, you say he could play receiver, but he was more natural as his defensive back. He just moved better. And he catches the ball relatively well, Ryan, but not like great. Not like when Cam Williams is going up after the ball. And you just kind of looked at it, and when he would move as a DB, you're just like, I know he doesn't understand what he's doing yet, but he just moves like a defensive back. He can flip his hips with ease and all that type of stuff. And we'll get into the film a little bit. But when you can land a kid who's a legitimate Power 5 player on both sides of the ball, a legitimate top 150 to 200 player on both sides of the ball, because I don't know if I'd put him all the way up into the top 100 on defense, but he's a guy that Ryan brings a lot of talent to the table, and we'll get into the film a little bit here, and we'll show you 2 different sets of film. We'll show you a little bit of his receiver film, but then we'll show you some sophomore film, because I have yet to be able to find any junior film of him playing defense, except a couple clips here and there. It's mostly offensive stuff. So, but you'll get a chance to see the athleticism, Ryan. So class impact wise, it moves the rankings up a little bit for those that care about that. It meets a huge need from a number standpoint, and it adds an impact talent to the roster. And ultimately, that last one, Ryan, is the one that matters most. Are you adding impact talent to the roster? And so now I would argue that Notre Dame has a potential impact player talent-wise at every position on defense: corner, safety, linebacker, defensive line. I'd say linebacker is probably the bigger question mark, but I do think that Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak at least have some impact potential. They just have a long way to go. Yeah. But I think that's what he brings to the table. So really big pickup for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the film room. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, just to reiterate your point, Brian, is that this is the type of kid for his skill set that he has. Because again, folks, this is more of a free safety, work from depth, impact coverage. This is the type of kid that makes your defense a whole lot more versatile as far as the coverages that you can play, because you can take some more chances when you have a kid with this type of range on the back end and this type of upside from a coverage perspective. So I think it's natural. It's a massive pickup, not only from the talent in a vacuum of Brauntae Johnson, but also he's going to make people around him better if he's developed properly. He's going to let corners take a lot more chances, let underneath coverage take a lot more chances. You're going to get a lot of impact from around him.
Ryan, I think that last point is great because when you think about it, Notre Dame has really worked hard, and Mike Mickens has done a great job building up the cornerback depth chart in recent years. I mean, you talk about the Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey class, which is already paying huge dividends. You talk about the Christian Gray, um, Micah Bell class, which has tons of potential. Leonard Moore is a guy that I'm very high on. Carson Hobbs is a guy that brings a lot of intangibles to the table, and I'm very much looking forward to watching his senior season as we kind of get into this. But like we wear these gap closer shirt, right? And so, to me, he's one of those because he is the first safety they've really signed in the last few classes, really since Kyle Hamilton in 2019. That brings sort of that center fielder type of mentality ability to the game. Now they have guys that play middle of the field, but they're not impact players. They're more hash to hash guys, right? Where Brauntae can be more of a numbers to numbers guy in some instances. And that is so important to a defensive unit that has a bunch of corners that you want to play man coverage with.
Yes.
Because you want to be able to say, hey, we're going to bring that extra safety down. We're going to be able to get to 8 in the box in the run game, but also still be able to play you in the pass game because we've got 2 great corners that can cover you man to man, and we've got a safety that can be a true center fielder. And the fact that they haven't had that kind of guy, most of their safeties are more alley quarters type of guys. They don't really have any safeties on the roster that are true. I think Ben Minich can do it. It's not the first thing I'm asking him to do. I think that the Don Schuler can do it. It's not the first thing that I'm asking him to do. It's probably the third thing I'm asking him to do. It's just not something that you're looking for. Ramon Henderson has the body for it, but he's not really a natural at it. Xavier Watts can do it, but it's not the first thing I'm asking him to do. This is the first kid you're going to look at and say, this kid has true free safety, center fielder type of mentality. And when you have that, Ryan, in a 6'3", rangy, fast, smooth, athletic kid, it just gives you so many more options as a true cover one team. And Notre Dame wants to be a more of a true cover one team in certain looks. Now, they don't want to be only that. They want to still be able to disguise and do all that kind of stuff. And Brauntae gives you that ability. And I think you can also, because he's so rangy, you can do more things where you can disguise him a little bit more. And he can still get to the middle of the field in ways that other guys can't. And that's a big part of this thing as well.